As kids, many of us joined athletic leagues as soon as we were old enough, and virtually all of us did the same with respect to education. The exact time that we entered athletics or school was determined by our age at an arbitrary cutoff date. As it turns out, our birth date relative to these cutoff dates can make substantial differences in our life experiences. This is called the relative age effect. The relative age effect appears to determine our success in school, sports, and possibly even something as specific as whether or not we are diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But before discussing ADHD, let's introduce the concept of the relative age effect using an example from Malcolm Gladwell's popular book, Outliers. For junior hockey players wishing to enter junior hockey for a given year, the player must be 8 years old by December 31st. What that means is that for any given season, a child born on January 1st, who we'll call James, would be in the same age category as a child born on December 31st, who we'll call Dave. James will be a full year older than Dave, and that, on average, will give James physical and mental advantages over Dave. Likely given more success, more time on ice, James will be more likely to continue with hockey. Indeed, in Canadian junior hockey and even the NHL, the plurality of players are born in the beginning of their birth year. The least frequent birthdays in these leagues are at the end of the year. This is a manifestation of the relative age effect, which, not surprisingly, states that when grouped together, older kids do better than younger ones. Now let's look at a more thoroughly researched example with greater social and medical significance: the relative age effect, an ADHD diagnosis. Put very simply, ADHD describes conditions in people that cause them to behave with less focus and/or greater excitability and activity than is most common or normal in the population. The CDC estimates that 12.9% of boys aged 2 through 18 and 5.6% of girls of the same age range were diagnosed with ADHD. Harvard physician and economist Bapu Jena and colleagues asked whether a relative age effect could influence ADHD diagnosis, and in 2018 they published their finding in the New England Journal of Medicine. The effect they reported starts with school teachers. School teachers do not diagnose ADHD, but since they do spend a considerable time with children, they commonly are the people who recommend children for ADHD testing. In some studies, up to 50% of clinical assessments for ADHD start with suggestions from teachers. And since schools have defined cutoff dates for entry into kindergarten, Jena and colleagues wondered if there might be a difference in ADHD diagnosis rates between the oldest and the youngest kindergarten students within a class. By studying an enormous database of insurance claims, the scientists were able to access data on a total of 400,000 patients who entered kindergarten in the years 2012, 2013, and 2014. The researchers focused primarily on states that used a cutoff date of September 1st. So in any given year, a child age 5 prior to September 1st would be enrolled. A child who would turn 5 on September 1st or later would wait until the next school year. So imagine a child named Andrea, born on August 31st, 2007. She would be in the same class as Serena, born in September 1st, 2006. Though they are classmates, Serena would be a full year or 20% older than Andrea. The study's authors hypothesize that students like Andrea might be a little less focused and a little less likely to sit still than those like Serena due to nothing more than their relatively young age. And this could lead to a recommendation for ADHD testing. If physicians were to err on the side of diagnosing a false case rather than missing a genuine case, a relative age effect would be observed. And what the scientists discovered was that in states where the cutoff date was September 1st, children born in August were 34% more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than those who were born in September. Remember, those born in August were on average 11 months younger than their September-born classmates. So the data suggested that some of the diagnosed would not be diagnosed if the test were only delayed by 11 months. This is a big claim, so it requires more evidentiary support. So the scientists then compared students closer in age in September 1 cutoff states. When July-born children were compared with August-born children, there was no statistical difference in ADHD diagnosis. Similarly, a comparison of September-born and October-born children showed no significant difference in ADHD diagnosis as well. But there were more experiments to perform to test the veracity of the apparent relative age effect. The scientists asked whether there was a difference in the diagnosis of ADHD in August versus September-born kids in a grouping of states where the cutoff dates were anything but September 1st. There wasn't. However, critical data that they didn't show was whether there was a significant discrepancy in diagnosis between July and August-born students in states with August 1 cutoffs, nor did they report data comparing September-born with October-born students in states with October 1 cutoffs. Now, what the authors of the study conclude is that some, certainly not all, but some of the youngest students in a class are being recommended for ADHD testing simply because they are expected to behave with the attention span and control of someone older. They're saying that some kids diagnosed with ADHD don't have ADHD. They're just less well developed, not because of any disorder, simply because they're younger. And the researchers were also curious about the medical responses to these diagnoses. For kids with genuine ADHD, there are medications that are appropriate for some and can be helpful. But the data suggests that some children who are erroneously diagnosed will be prescribed medication too. This, of course, would carry risk because all drugs carry side effects. So Dr. Jen and colleagues studied pharmaceutical use and found that August-born children on average were on medications for 120 more days than September-born children. And for these patients, the prescription of these drugs is reinforced because they appear to work. If children are falsely diagnosed with ADHD only because of their young age, as they mature, develop greater focus, etc., a physician could interpret this change as an effect of the medication, while in actuality it might be due to natural maturation. And the relative age effect can also be seen in physical skills, test scores, and even diagnosis of depression, with those born just before the academic cutoffs winding up on the losing end. Indeed, in England, where the academic cutoff is September 1st, there is a term, the August birth penalty, which reflects the fact that August-born children are statistically more likely to score poorly on standardized tests. So, while there is a lot of support for the relative age effect in many areas, I'm a little on the fence with regard to its effect on ADHD diagnosis. The data presented in Jena's paper is somewhat convincing, but the missing analysis on alternative cutoff dates is just too troubling. To become more confident with their conclusions, I really need to see more direct evidence that the cliff of ADHD diagnosis moves affirmatively with cutoff dates.